All right, so let's begin. Welcome everybody, and welcome back to another episode here, all about sustainability and talking to people around the world who are doing some really cool things on the sustainability front, and hopefully provide education and inspiration for all of us. Just as a quick reminder, we are doing these now every month on the last Tuesday of the month. So join us next month, last Tuesday of the month. You can always sort of put this on your calendar as a recurring meeting. And we hope to bring you really great people. And as I've always said before, if we have people all over the world on this. So if you know of somebody who you're like, wow, there's somebody in my part of the world that's doing something amazing, let us know, because our idea here is it's all about sharing. It's all about all of us working together, the power of the white jacket to make those changes globally. So with that, and I want to also give a quick shout out to Lynn, of course, who always turns her camera off. Lynn in Paris with World Chefs makes all this stuff possible, and she is the manager of the Feed the Planet program. So it's really great to have her there. So let's go ahead and begin today with Chef Branden Lewis, who is joining us from Johnson & Wales University, because we're going to talk all about education today. It's been a while since we've had an educator on. We've talked to other experts in other parts of this whole sort of sustainability world. It's been a while since we've talked education. So just as a quick introduction to him, and I want to say chef, but it's also doctor. So it's, I guess, Dr. Chef. So Dr. Branden Lewis, he is an associate professor at Johnson Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island. He's also a certified executive chef with the American Culinary Federation, and is really an expert in sustainable food systems, which is what we're going to talk about today. So he obviously believes in sustainability, or believes that sustainability topics should be part of all culinary education. And I hope we have a bunch of educators on us today, or on this webcast today, because we can hopefully have a really cool discussion at the end of this. So we're going to get into some of the other things he's done, because he was named, this is really cool, he was named a food hero by the Edible Rhody magazine from Rhode Island. That's why it's called Rhody. Because he did a lot of work with immigrant communities. We're going to talk about that, refugee communities. He also was featured on a really cool TV show called Bizarre Foods America with Andrew Zimmern. And I'm dying to know what bizarre foods you showed him and had him taste. It's a really cool show. But he is basically now at Johnson & Wales, where he also was a student. So he's back now, back to his alma mater, and he is heading up the Sustainable Food Systems Bachelor's Program and also the Culinary Sustainability Minor. So lots to talk about. You have tons of awards here. I'm just looking at your bio here. Distinguished Service Award, Outstanding Service Award, Advisor of the Year, Teacher of the Year. Is there anything you haven't been awarded over there? I mean, if so, let me know. I'll talk to the dean. I'll get you all set up on that.
Takes a lot of money. But you got
Anyway,
me blushing.
Chef, welcome. And I just want to sort of begin on that whole sort of social justice piece, that whole refugee immigrant thing. Because, part of what World Chefs does is we do work with disenfranchised populations, and we actually teach them culinary arts to give them an economic start in life, if you will. But tell me a little bit about what you were doing before you went to Johnson & Wales.
Well, so before I went to Johnson Wales, as a faculty member, I was, I did my stint working in Europe, Michelin star restaurants, and I came back to Providence interested in doing something a little different with my culinary background. And I got a job working at a nonprofit called the Genesis Center, where I was able to help immigrant and refugee communities get affiliated with living in the US. So I did workforce development, and I helped people get, working positions in restaurants all in our area. And, as a white male, I had a lot to learn in that role. And I grew a lot as an educator and developed a real passion for sustainability, not just environmental sustainability, but communities as well.
That's really great. And so you were teaching them essentially food service, or how to cook, or how'd that work?
Yeah, so we would do they would get a like food safety sanitation as well as learning culinary techniques and skills. And so pretty much what they needed to get these entry level positions started at different places. Some broke out into entrepreneurial roles, some opened food trucks, and others worked restaurant lines and kitchens throughout the city. And many of them still work there, today. And as I followed them all, through their careers.
This is one of the beautiful things about being an educator, right? Is to watch the people that you have taught sort of become and hopefully improve in life. So that's
Yeah,
really
oh my
cool.
God, brings a tear to your eye. It's amazing.
So you have a doctorate, and your doctorate is in educational sustainability. Tell me a little
Yes.
bit about that.
Well, I was looking to get a doctorate degree because I really wanted to sort of investigate culinary education, how we can make it more sustainable in itself, and how we can help train chefs to be, change agents in the world around them. And so I found the perfect doctoral program at the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, and I saw there's some representation in the video call today from that alma mater, and I just had the most amazing experience studying culinary education, the traditions of the chef, and transitioning that into the new world, the world we live in today, where our communities are becoming more important and tighter, and it requires a chef to take on a new role, not a top-down role, but a participant role with their food system.
So tell me a little bit more about that sort of participant shift, if you will, from top down. How do you see that sort of playing out in the future?
Right. So a lot of that exists in this new program that we've launched at the university in sustainable food systems. And this is where, I'm taking students out into the farming community and out to, we're right on the ocean here in Providence. So we're going out on the ocean with our fishermen too. And we're learning about not only where our food comes from and where it's grown, but how to work with and communicate with our community. So as a chef, we're not in a position where we're demanding ingredients be brought to us. We're working within our ecosystem and within our environment to have products to work with farmers and growers to use products that they are producing in season. So we're participating in the food system rather than demanding it, heed our needs, you could say.
That's interesting. So in other words, instead of sort of the previous model, I guess, where, chef says, I have to have this now, it's more of a cooperative model. Would that
Right,
be a good
right.
way to sort of describe it?
Yeah, so instead of putting my farmers under stress to try to produce some sort of like green hard tomato in January, because I'm in New England, we wait till they're in season and we work with our farmers who extend their seasons as much as they can. But we have the best tomato available because it was locally produced, it was picked ripe, it's amazing and life altering, and that's all because we worked with our growers to source them. And they're not just a tomato; it's like an heirloom tomato that's just remarkable in flavor and every characteristic you can imagine, as an example.
So, we talked a little bit earlier about this kind of shift in paradigm, that this shift in model. And one of the things that you talked about was that we're sort of moving into more of a coaching, mentoring versus top down. So it's not just with the farmer, but it's also with students and potentially with employees. So before we actually get into the nuts and bolts of this program, which we're going to do in a moment, tell me a little bit about that and how that maybe affects your teaching, or how do you see that playing out in sort of the larger food service world?
Right. This is a humongous concept. So, the idea is sustainability is more than just, food waste and, product management. It's also about people and communities. It's about your environment. It's also about having an economic, sustainably, sound business model too. But in the kitchen, when we talk about communities, the first community you need to worry about is your kitchen family and the people that are looking to you to provide opportunities for them to learn and to grow and to make a career out of their participation in your restaurant dream. And so those kitchens, and we're seeing it more and more every day, students are reacting and going to and gravitating towards restaurants that are coaching, participative, where they're working together with the chef, and the chef is building them up into, basically um, the next generation of chef, versus that top-down traditional master apprenticeship approach. Students aren't attracted to those authoritative kitchens anymore. That age has kind of gone, and I've got my bumps, bruises, and scrapes from when I went through it. But students are no, the workforce is in pretty high demand here in the US. And so students are becoming a little more selective in what they're able to choose.
That's really interesting because but the reason I asked you that, because I also believe that there is a major shift underway. And I also grew up in those very top-down sort of models. When like we would always say in France when I was working there, there is only one response to the chef, and that's "oui chef," right? So, I mean, yes, chef, that's all you ever say. And I understand that, right? And in the middle of a crazy service, that's not the time to be like, let's dialogue about this dish. It's like, no, we just go 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 go. But I think that top down model, to your point, is if that is the model that we are espousing, we are not going to attract the best talent. And I truly believe that. Things have changed, and I thank you for sort of talking about that. So
Yeah.
let's shift excuse me, to what you're doing at Johnson & Wales now, because you've started this whole new program. Tell us a little bit about it. And I know this is still in its infancy, but give us kind of an overview of what you're doing and the program in general.
Right. So the program's new, but the concept, we put together some sustainability coursework and concentrations back in 2011, and they were enormously popular with the students. And so it's bloomed into its own major and minor. And so we have a program where students are working, where they're growing products and they're creating, menus around gardens and gardens around menus. They're going out into their food system and they're working in the kitchen with local products. And so behind me, you can actually see my class cooking. And they're in there working on their plant-based cuisine course, which I'm teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And they are working on chef table prep, and they're preparing basically menus where chefs are they as chefs are inviting in the growers that are inspiring their cuisine and their dishes. And so those growers come in, they're actually getting to taste their own food, but prepared. And the students are able to sort of articulate what was it about this dish and the farmers' practices that motivated them and inspired the course. And so there's a series of classes that we do this plant-based cuisine. We have a snout to tail class called conscious cuisine, where we're looking at permaculture, animals, and things like that. And students are really challenging themselves to learn about their food system and some of the tough issues and challenges that we need to weigh every day when it comes to sourcing sustainable products.
So kind of a follow up to that, you're talking a lot about local, 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 right? Which is,
Yes.
we're focusing on local farmers and all that. Do you also get into kind of the globalness of food? Because, when we talk about food systems, obviously there are local food systems, but there's a whole global interconnectedness of food systems, for right or wrong, that exists today. Do you talk about that?
Yeah, we definitely do, and there is no like sort of vilification of large stream, large commercial food producers. But what we do look at them as they're part of the solution potentially. So if farmers are, I mean, if chefs are voting with their consumer dollar and they're actually emphasizing more regionalized, localized menus, then big producers are going to start redirecting their supply chains to focus on local food supply distribution. There will always be products that have to come from somewhere else, but when you can emphasize the locally grown products, then you're eating within your ecosystem. You have a more sustainable plate and menu overall. But the solution is getting that global community to buy in and be part of that solution overall.
Interesting. So I love what you said about vilification, because I think that sometimes we look at the small farmer as the good person and the big company as kind of the evil one, right?
Right.
And that's just not true, because big isn't necessarily bad. Big in fact can do enormous good, at the same time. So that's a
Right.
great point.
Right. I
So
was, oh,
yep,
sorry. Oh,
no,
no,
please.
I was just going to add, I was at a conference last year with the National Restaurant Association, and I was sitting at a round table and I was shocked at all these large food companies and they all have sustainability offices and officers and people that are in charge of making sure those supply chains are clean. And so a lot of them are moving in that direction too. So we're seeing a movement, not just at the local level, but also at the national and world level as well.
That's cool. So when your students go and spend some time with a fisherman or go to a farm, what are they learning when they do that?
Well, one great example to answer your question is, I've had students that do like internships where they spend 3 days at the restaurant, 3 days at the farm, or two and three. And one student came back saying, like, I spent, 8 hours picking peas, and I'll tell you, chef, I didn't drop one pea in the restaurant. You- there's an entirely new respect for food products. So if you want to teach your staff, if you're a restaurant chef, you want to teach your staff about food waste, make them harvest one day. Go out and have your staff meeting at a farm and have them harvest. You're going to see that kale will never hit the trash can again. That those products are going to be valued because there's so much human power that goes into our products. And so there's a political ecology, a tracing that goes from the people that grew it to the final place where it ends up. And that, in our case, is on the plate, hopefully.
That's a great point. So, it's learning that intrinsic value. Um, when I was in culinary education, I would always say that our students had to understand that food doesn't begin with the box that shows up at the back door of the restaurant.
Right.
And, when you understand that, to your point, I think that really drives home the fact that every bit of food that we get is something that is critically important, right? And has value. And it took energy and water and labor to produce that and
Carbon,
move it.
everything.
And yeah, it's great point. So after they go to a farm, right? So you mentioned that they're cooking today, and the farmers, the producers, are going to eat what they made or taste what they made. Is that how that?
Yeah, so students are allowed to invite their own table, but usually I'm looking for like a hardliner, so they got to have a chef on there, someone who can critique their food, and they're looking for the growers that inspired their menu options. And so in the class that I teach, that's a sister course to this, I take students all over our food system. And in New England, we're lucky because everything's very close. We have a lot of different farms and farmland, and we have the ocean. So students get a really good perspective, and they meet a lot of growers and a lot of farmers, and so they can source their products, and usually they make that connection. They learn how to communicate in their food system, and they bring them in for their chef table. So they're inspired to invite that grower.
Well, I'm just curious. What's the grower response when they're there?
Oh my
I mean,
goodness. They're really excited to get, off the farm and get into a nice fancy 5 course luncheon at the university with views of the bay and all that. So that's huge. And farmers are really excited. We have some that are very gregarious, so they're like making noise and having the best time ever. And I think it's just inspiring. I mean, students at the end of the semester, some of them are in tears because it's such a transformational experience, transformative to go through this process of learning about their food system, connecting with it, and understanding that they have a role to play, and they can change the world being a chef, and that's powerful.
so you have to send some pictures of their dishes and the producers, and we'll we'll
Oh,
we'll post them. So all right,
absolutely, yeah.
that'll be kind of cool. All right, so big question for you. What is as you I mean, you spend a lot of time looking at food systems, right? What does it look like in the future? What's the future of our food systems? If
Well,
you were to
yeah. So the future of our food systems is A, they have to be adaptable. B, they have to be resilient, and they have to be ready to, be resilient against issues and challenges we haven't even seen or faced before. And that's the same sort of qualities that we need to have out of our chefs coming out of education today. They're the leaders that are going to have to adapt to things like COVID and futures that are totally uncertain, and be adaptable and be able to put out safe, healthy food to their communities and be participants, as we've said. But that's their role now. Critical thinkers that are adaptive, resilient, and that can make their food system the same way.
Fabulous. So what is the outcome? So we're going to get real educational now. What is the educational outcome of your students? What do you hope that they will have when they graduate? Outside of just culinary, because they do spend time just learning, to cook, right? I mean,
Yes,
before they sort
yes.
of go into your specialty. But when they finish with you at the end of they're graduating, what do you hope that they have, and what do you see them doing?
I want their coats to say change agent right on it, because I want them to go out and I want them to, like I said, save the world. I want them to go into their food system, make an echo in how they, they're from all over the United States and the world, our students. We have students from everywhere. And so I want them to go back to their homes and their hometowns and show that there's value in that local food product and in their regional supply chains, and actually promote those products and those ideals. Chefs have a platform, and we need to use it to help, have a sustainable food future.
I love the words change agent. That's important for us because the power of the white jacket does have that ability. So I'm going to ask you a very personal question now, and this one you have to answer. Ready? What
Oh
is
boy,
the what is your favorite class in the whole curriculum?
it's got to be a
So
tie
unfair.
between my plant-based cuisine class and my sustainability in the culinary kitchen class. Those are my favorites because they've
And
been here the longest.
okay, all right. And so tell me just briefly about each one, just snapshot.
Well, the sustainability and culinary kitchen class is actually an academic, but it's not like an academic where we're like looking at PowerPoints and stuff. We're like out there. We go to the farms tomorrow or Thursday. We're going to Blackbird Farm, which is a grass-fed farm here in Rhode Island with Black Angus cattle. And so we're going to see basically livestock production. We're going to participate on the farm, and we're going to cook on the farm under the sky. So, I mean, how can you not love that class? And then in plant-based cuisine behind me, student-driven menus and recipes. They're learning about the plant-based genre, meat minimalism, and all vegetarian cuisines, and they're putting together their skills and know-how by the end of the 15-day segment to put together amazing chef tables.
Awesome. All right, so let's go back to change agent for a minute because I'm going to ask you two questions, but you're speaking today to a group of people who are chefs. There are chef educators on here as well. And so if you were going to give sort of one kernel, one piece of advice, maybe, how can you be a great change agent in, in the food service world as a chef and in culinary education, wherever you may be teaching in the world? What do you say?
Well, the first thing I'd say is you have a lot of power and responsibility as a chef. Chefs are at the intersection of product sourcing, at the intersection of social justice, food access. You have the ability to choose products that are not detrimental to the environment, to humans or non-humans, and you have the ability to culture learners in your trade who will go through the ranks at your business, your restaurant, or at your educational institution, and give them the tools they need to be responsible, adaptive thinkers who can change the food system for the better. That's our role as chefs. We have a platform to be advocates for social food, socially just food, food access, and all those things. You have the power. So use it and take that responsibility seriously.
Awesome. And how about in education? Anything specific?
Yeah, I think you have to let the students know they're not just getting positions to be workers in restaurants anymore. These students are going to be leaders, and they're going to be, representing something. And so you want them to know that they have the power to change the world, and that they can have a career that means something besides what's behind the four walls of your restaurant or your business or whatever their future enterprise may be.
That's a great point because really when we think about, where chefs are today, I mean, I'm old enough, chef, I'm older than you are, so I'm old enough to remember, when chefs were kind of, in back there in the kitchen, and I've seen this transformation where all of a sudden chefs, are involved in policy decisions on governmental, levels, or, being consulted by the UN about, food policy. And that that wasn't the case when I started at all. And I think that, while chefs have become sort of rock stars in a certain way and become very visible, with that comes a lot of responsibility. And I think, chef, you're speaking to that and you're teaching to that, so that we have this next generation of chefs who take that very seriously. So I've got some questions here that are coming in. I have one here and by the way, I see also there, for all of you who are putting questions in the chat, please put them in the Q&A so I can see them. But I know, chef, there's a bunch of people who want to contact you. So,
Oh,
so
I can
stay
put
tuned.
my email in there. Yeah, stay tuned.
Yeah,
My
Lynn has
email's
been
gonna blow up today.
Yeah, Lynn has been putting out your email, so you have
Oh,
lots of
okay, good.
fans around the world now. So, anyways, there's a really interesting question here, and this is goes like this. I represent aquaculture, Global Aquaculture Alliance, which is an amazing group, and their best aquaculture practice certification. So, how do aquaculturists get chefs to see aquaculture growers as farmers?
Well, I
Thought.
think so. I think it's again about relationships. So, we know about like organic certification and crop growing and all these things, but what we like to talk about is face certification, and that's knowing your farmer. And so, knowing your fish farmer and knowing what they're putting into their product, their feed, how they're regulating their systems, and are there ecological impacts, or do they have a permaculture underwater system? Just depends on those sorts of details, but that's what you want to communicate to your chefs. So you want to have that kind of relationship together. So I know when I'm selling this fish to my customers, I can also talk about it, knowing what you put into it. So that's really, I think, an exciting partnership opportunity there.
Which is so interesting because your answer and so many of these answers goes back to education, 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 right? Which is we have to know, because we as chefs, we can't just a lot of times it was funny because, again, I'm old enough to remember when, like, aquaculture, everybody was amazing in aquaculture, then all of a sudden everybody is bad in aquaculture, and it's like, wait, stop. This swinging of the pendulum is not helpful. Instead, we have to get sort of into those details and understand what's actually going on. So, again, quick
Exactly.
call out to
Fish
the Global Aquaculture Alliance. They do really great work. What were you going to say, Chef? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, fish are not black and white. They have seasons. There are conditions that you need to know. You need to know about what fish are under pressure and which ones are within harvestable size, and all that stuff that you need to know as a chef. And so there is a big education. And David Orr is famous for saying we need not just education, but education of a different kind. And so we need education that focuses on these things when we teach our chefs about product sourcing and knowing about seafood sustainability, and aquaculture has a huge role to play there.
Well, Chef, I have to say, I love what you're doing over there because you are really sort of grabbing the bull by the horns and recognizing that for today's culinary students, there is so much for them to know. When I started as a young cook, it was just about, hey, how do you cook? That's it, right? Today it's not just about that. We live in a very different world where we have to really, really understand where our food is coming from and how it's being produced, and looking at things like waste, etc. There was a comment in the chat here a little earlier in which somebody, talking about your pea example, and somebody said, well, if you think about meat production, animal protein production, something sacrificed to life
Right.
to be, to be in your kitchen being cooked. And that also is a very sort of conscious realization that that's kind of sacred. It's not just, oh, a
Yes.
chicken. There's value to that. And I think when you understand that, that changes the way you cook. So, Chef, congratulations. Before we go, I do have to ask you one really important question. So Andrew Zimmern, he does this crazy show called Bizarre Foods, right? Where he goes all over the world eating bizarre foods. You were on his show. I'm just curious, what did you show him that was bizarre?
Well, they had reached out to us because they wanted to do some sustainable sort of snout to tail something, but they wanted it seafood related. So we did a snout to fin monkfish dish, and I did it with my buddy who Chef Dean Deladon. He and I both co-starred on that episode, and what I worked on was I put together ankimo, the liver from the monkfish. So I did an an air-rated monkfish liver mousse, and so basically made like a traditional mousse with the monkfish liver, and then put in a little gelatin and some a little hydrocolloid action, and then you put the mason jar in the cryovac machine with the lid loose, and it pulls a suction and it inflates the aeration, and then when the suction is released, the lid snaps shut, and then you can just screw it on, put it in the blast chiller, and it sets your foam. And so I did basically a foamed aerated monkfish liver mousse. Took a lot of R&D, but that was a really fun product that we put together there.
And did he like it?
he thought it was crazy cool. So I was impressed. I impressed Andrew Zimmern, who goes around the world like tasting sea urchins, and I'm not sea urchins, but like even sea cucumbers and stuff. And he's like tasting everything, and he's like, "This is amazing," you know. So that was awesome. That was like a career moment for me.
Congratulations. Well, we are pretty much out of time, but Chef, I want to thank you for taking the time this morning out of your class. Hopefully, your students back there are behaving themselves. I can't
Right,
really
right. I've
see
been like,
with the glare on the glass. I can't see them that well, but I spent many years in culinary education, and I really appreciate what you're doing. We talk so often about the future, and that World Chefs is really focused on empowering chefs, and also thinking about who's coming up next, right? Who's coming up to replace us one day, and what are the skills and the mindset that they're going to have. And I think, the thing you talked about, change agent, and understanding that you have power to change, that is so critical. And of course, have the knowledge to do it. So, Chef, a huge thank you. I'm gonna let you go back to your class,
thank
and
you.
for and for everybody who's joined us, as always, it is such a pleasure to be with you, and it's so fun when I see all of you coming up on the chats. And as I've mentioned before, at the next World Chefs Congress, we're going to figure something out for as many of you that can be there. We're going to do like a little reception so we can actually all meet each other in person. But in the meantime, keep doing great work, everybody. Keep trying to change this world through the power of the white jacket. So thank you. And Chef, once again, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It was an honor.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.